The Siege of Maastricht ended when Jacques de Fariaux, the governor of the Dutch garrison, surrendered to an army under the command of Louis XIV during the Franco-Dutch War. Prelude. The siege was one of the key elements in King Louis XIV's plans to attack the Netherlands, in order to revenge the humiliating conditions enforced on him by the Triple Alliance when he tried to fully conquer the Spanish Netherlands. After making a feint for Ghent and Brussels, Louis marched his army past Maastricht, a condominium of the United Provinces and the Bishopric of Liege, in May 1672, not bothering to take the fortress. In 1673, when his supply lines became threatened, he decided to capture Maastricht. The siege began on the 11th of June. The city would be the first major city to be attacked by Sebastian Vauban, the master of siegecraft in his time. Siege. In addition to firing upon the city walls with cannon, Vauban ordered the building of trenches, in a zigzag pattern, parallel to the walls before the Tongate on the night of 17–18 June 1673. These trenches made it more difficult for the defenders from having a clear shot at the attackers and, in addition, allowed for the protection of military miners to allow them to reach the base of the fortifications and plant mines to make a breach. By the 25th of June the Allies were ready to assault a hornwork and ravelin in front of the gate. The 24th of June was the feast day of St. John the Baptist, and so Louis attempted to finish conquering the city in time to celebrate Mass in Maastricht's cathedral. The trenches were completed, the King's Regiment, and the Company of the Grey Musketeers led the march into the city, under the command of Captain Lieutenant Charles de Batz-Castelmore d'Artagnan, also known as Le Comte d'Artagnan. The French, after some difficult fighting, crossed the moat and seized a crescent-shaped fortification which would become the scene of the toughest fighting of the siege. Most of the French were driven out by Spanish auxiliaries soon afterwards, but about 30 men held out the entire night. The Duke of Monmouth was Colonel of the Blues, and trench general. The serving battalion officer, Sir Henry Jones, formerly a Catholic exile, was like the Anglicans enraged at having to fight fellow Protestants. Moreover, half their contingent were Dutchmen, pledged to go into battle against their countrymen. Unsurprisingly, they refused to fight, and resorted to rounding up deserters. Jones recruited his own regiment, yet was killed in the siege. Until that time, Monmouth was accompanied by a young Captain John Churchill, tried to take a covered road protecting the moat, and withdrew after suffering the loss of 300 men. It was Captain Churchill who planted a flag on the outwork. The next morning the Allies awoke to the sound of a Frenchman in Dutch service, Jacques de Fariaux, recapturing the Ravelin. This was a half-moon-shaped demi-lune, used to keep attackers out of the bastion. The hornwork or crownwork was a spiky plan covered every angle of approach. When the Duke of Monmouth rallied his troops to a second assault, they were driven back once more, and Comte d'Artagnan was killed. But the Duke did the part of a much older and more experienced general. But Fariaux realized that Vauban's siege artillery techniques were too overwhelming, and capitulated on terms on 30 June 1673. On 1 July the survivors of the garrison march out of the city with full military honours and safe conduct to the nearest Dutch garrison. The unpopular war led to the disbandment of most regimental battalions raised, and the Treaty of Westminster in February 1674. Aftermath. When the Treaty of Nijmegen ended the war between France and the Dutch, Maastricht was returned to the Dutch, though Louis kept a number of Habsburg cities. What is generally regarded as more significant about this battle were the revolutionary advances in siegecraft engineered by Vauban.